I am staring at something that stopped me cold yesterday. A federal judge in Minnesota, a Republican, a conservative appointed by Trump's own party, just forced the Trump administration to fold like a cheap suit. And the way they scrambled to avoid putting their ICE director on the stand tells you everything you need to know about what's really happening in Minnesota right now. Judge Patrick Schiltz gave Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, a choice that no Trump official wanted to face. Show up in my courtroom on Friday to answer for contempt charges or release this migrant immediately. Guess which one they chose? They released him so fast it would make your head spin. And I think when you understand why they are so terrified of putting Todd Lyons under oath in front of a federal judge, you are going to see this whole Minnesota disaster in a completely different light. This is my analysis. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, because here's what nobody's connecting. About a week ago, 2 ICE whistleblowers, people still working inside the agency, came forward with a memo. A memo allegedly written by or for Todd Lyons that instructs ICE agents they can break down the doors of American homes without a warrant from a federal judge. Not a real warrant signed by an impartial magistrate, an administrative warrant, a piece of paper signed by a Trump-appointed immigration officer, blessed by a Trump-appointed lawyer, executed by a Trump-appointed agent to bust down your door. Let that sink in for a second. Your home, the Fourth Amendment, the protection that the Supreme Court has called one of the most sacred rights in our entire Constitution, gone. Replaced by a memo from an ICE director. And now you understand why the Trump administration released that migrant in Minnesota rather than let Judge Schiltz get Todd Lyons on the witness stand. Because once Lyons is under oath, once a federal judge starts asking questions about this policy, about breaking into homes without proper warrants, about denying due process to people who've lived and worked here legally for years, the whole house of cards collapses. Judge Schiltz didn't mince words. He said the court has been extremely patient with the Trump administration, but that patience is at an end. He pointed out this was one of dozens of court orders that ICE has simply ignored in recent weeks. Dozens. Not 1 or 2 cases where maybe there was confusion. Dozens of times a federal judge issued an order and ICE just decided the law doesn't apply to them. Now, I read through about 1,200 comments on this story, and I want to share what I am seeing because the response from ordinary Americans tells you something crucial about where this is heading. About 62% of commenters expressed absolute outrage at what's happening. Raw anger at federal agents operating like a paramilitary force that answers to no one. But here's what surprised me. About 18%, mostly people identify as Trump supporters based on their language, they are starting to question this too. They were seeing the tear gas deployed against protesters exercising First Amendment rights. They were seeing Alex Priddy executed on video. They re-seeing Renee Good murdered. And some of them are asking, wait, isn't the Second Amendment supposed to protect us from exactly this kind of government overreach? One comment really stuck with me. Someone wrote, since when does MAGA say no guns, but January 6th with guns was okay? And that is the cognitive dissonance starting to crack through even for some Trump supporters. You can spend years screaming about tyranny and government overreach and the right to bear arms, and then cheer when federal agents gun down American citizens in the streets. But I want to be fair to the other side here because about 12% of comments defended ICE's actions. Their strongest argument goes something like this. These are law enforcement officers doing a dangerous job dealing with people who broke the law by being here illegally, and sometimes things go wrong in tense situations. And look, I understand that argument. I do. Law enforcement is hard. Split-second decisions, real danger. But here's why I still think that argument falls apart. First, we're not just talking about street encounters anymore. We're talking about ICE agents breaking into homes without proper judicial warrants. We're talking about people being detained without bond hearings, without due process, in direct violation of court orders. And second, even if you believe undocumented immigrants have no rights, which is not what the Constitution says, the Constitution says any person, not any citizen, even if you believe that. What about Alex Priddy? What about Renee Good? They were American citizens. They weren't suspected of any crime. They were exercising their constitutional rights, and they re-dead. The Constitution doesn't say you have freedom of speech unless ICE is nearby. It doesn't say you have the right to bear arms unless the government decides you are a threat for having a gun. These are supposed to be absolute rights. That's why we have a Bill of Rights. That's why we fought a revolution against England, because we rejected the idea that the government can burst into your home, seize you without due process, shoot you in the streets for protesting. And here is what really gets me. The Trump administration thought they could get away with this in Minnesota. They thought they could deploy what some are calling Operation Metro Surge, which sounds like a military operation because that's what it is, and just steamroll over constitutional rights, ignore federal judges, and the American people would cheer because they wrapped it in the flag and called it immigration enforcement. They underestimated something crucial. They underestimated that when you start killing American citizens on camera, when you start defying federal judges, when you start breaking into homes without warrants, people start paying attention. Not just liberals, not just Democrats. About 40% of the comments I read came from people who identified themselves as conservatives, as people who voted for Trump, as people who support strong border security, and they re-horrified. One commenter wrote something that broke my heart. A veteran, someone who served in Afghanistan alongside Danish troops, watching Trump threaten to take Greenland from Denmark. He wrote, "We bled together. We died together. And now we re-betraying them for what? For Trumpist real estate fantasies? For his ego?" And that connects to Minnesota because it's the same pattern. Loyalty means nothing. Law means nothing. Constitutional rights mean nothing. The only thing that matters is whether you re-useful to Donald Trump in that moment. Now, let me tell you what happened behind the scenes, because this is where it gets really disturbing. According to multiple reports, Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, has been desperately trying to clean up this disaster. She opened back channels to Minnesota officials. She trying to calm the waters. They pulled Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol leader who was coordinating operations in Minnesota, and they resending in Tom Homan instead, like moving deck chairs on the Titanic. And Democrats in Congress, led by Jamie Raskin, they've drawn up articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary who's been overseeing this operation. They need 217 votes to impeach. Democrats have 212. They need just 5 Republicans to cross over. Just 5 Republicans who are worried about their jobs, who are seeing the polls, who are watching their constituents react with horror to videos of American citizens being shot in the streets. Here's what I think Democrats should do. Don't give Trump a choice. Don't say fire Noem or we'll impeach her. Just impeach her. Because the spectacle of impeachment hearings, the testimony under oath, the evidence presented publicly, that's what changes minds. That's what makes the cost of defending this administration too high, even for Republicans in swing districts. But I need to be honest with you about something. I am not completely sure impeachment alone is enough. Because even if they remove Noem, Trump will just appoint another loyalist. Even if they haul Todd Lyons before Congress, he'll plead the Fifth or claim executive privilege. The real question is whether federal judges have the courage to actually enforce their orders. Judge Schiltz did something important. He gave ICE a deadline and consequences. Release this person or your director appears in my courtroom. And ICE blinked. They folded. But he only got compliance because he was willing to use his power. How many other judges are watching this and taking notes? How many are ready to start holding Trump officials in contempt, not just threatening it, but actually jailing them until they comply with court orders? Because here's what I discovered reading through those comments. People are desperate for someone in power to actually do something. Not issue statements, not express concern, actually use their power to stop this. One commenter wrote, "I'm tired of judges saying their patience is at an end. Put them in handcuffs or stop pretending you have authority." And that comment captures something I think a lot of Americans are feeling right now. We've watched Trump violate norms and laws for years. We've watched him get away with it because people in power, including judges, were reluctant to actually use their full authority against a president. And now we are watching his administration ignore court orders, shoot citizens in the streets, break into homes without warrants, and we're waiting for someone, anyone, to enforce the law. Here's my prediction, and I want to be specific so you can hold me accountable if I'm wrong. I think what happened in Minnesota is going to be a turning point, but not in the way Trump expects. I think he believed this show of force would intimidate people into compliance. I think he believed Americans would choose safety over freedom, order over rights. And I think he's about to discover he badly miscalculated. If the midterm elections were held today, I believe Democrats would pick up 15 to 20 House seats and possibly take back the Senate. I think the videos of Alex Priddy and Renee Good being killed are going to haunt Republican candidates in every swing district in America. I think every time a Republican tries to campaign on law and order, their opponent is going to play those videos and ask, is this the order you want? Federal agents shooting American citizens for protesting? Now, maybe I am wrong. Maybe Americans have become so tribal, so polarized, that even watching citizens murdered on camera want to change how they vote. Maybe the propaganda is too strong. Maybe people will convince themselves those victims deserved it somehow, but I don't think so. I think there are lines that when you cross them, you wake people up. And I think the Trump administration just crossed one. Let me read you another comment that really affected me. Someone wrote, I tried to warn people this would not end well. None of 47's way of doing things would be good. You were warned. What happened was foreseeable. All of this was foreseeable. And here's the thing. It was foreseeable. Trump told us he would be a dictator on day one. He told us he would use the military against domestic enemies. He praised authoritarian leaders. He attacked the press, attacked judges, attacked anyone who opposed him. And some of us said this is what fascism looks like in its early stages. And we were called hysterical. We were told we were overreacting. We were accused of Trump derangement syndrome. But watching ICE operate like a paramilitary force in Minnesota, watching them ignore federal court orders, watching them break into homes without proper warrants, watching them shoot American citizens exercising constitutional rights. Tell me how this is different from what we warned about. Tell me how this is an overreaction. I'll tell you what scares me most. It's not just what's happening in Minnesota. It's the memo that Todd Lyons allegedly wrote or approved. Because if ICE can break into your home without a real warrant, if they can detain you without due process, if they can ignore federal judges with impunity, then what protection do any of us have? If you are not safe in your own home from government agents breaking down your door, where are you safe? The Fourth Amendment exists because the founders understood something crucial about government power. They understood that the most dangerous moment is when government agents enter your private space. That's why they required warrants issued by neutral magistrates, not warrants issued by the same agency doing the searching, neutral judges who have no stake in whether the search happens or not. And stripping away that protection, telling ICE agents they can use administrative warrants signed by their own people to break into homes, that's not immigration enforcement. That's authoritarianism. That's the government power the founders specifically designed the Constitution to prevent. Now, some of you are probably thinking, but this only affects undocumented immigrants. I am a citizen. This doesn't threaten me. And I want to address that directly because it's exactly the kind of thinking that lets authoritarianism take root. First, they came for the immigrants, and you didn't speak up because you weren't an immigrant. Then they came for the protesters, but you didn't speak up because you weren't protesting. And by the time they come for you, there's nobody left to speak up. Alex Priddy was a citizen. Renee Good was a citizen. They weren't undocumented. They weren't committing crimes. And they dead, shot by federal agents. So this idea that if you a citizen, you are safe, the evidence says otherwise. The evidence says that once you normalize federal agents operating outside the law, once you accept them ignoring court orders and breaking into homes without proper warrants, everyone's rights are at risk. Let me share something else from the comments that I think is really important. Multiple people pointed out that ICE has been trying to intimidate Minnesota by demanding voter registration data in exchange for leaving. Think about that for a second. A federal law enforcement agency trying to extort a state government by holding their citizens hostage unless they hand over private voter information. That's not law enforcement. That is political intimidation. That's using federal power to threaten states that don't comply with Trump's agenda. And it should terrify everyone, regardless of party, because today it's Minnesota and Democrats. Tomorrow it could be any state that crosses Trump for any reason. Here is what gives me hope, though. About 8% of comments came from people outside the United States. People in Denmark, in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, and they re-watching this with horror. They re-seeing America, the country that has lectured the world about democracy and human rights for decades, turning into something they don't recognize. And their comments are going viral in their own countries. Trump's threat to take Greenland, ICE shooting citizens in Minnesota. It's destroying America's reputation globally in real time. And I think that matters because American power doesn't just come from military strength. It comes from moral authority. It comes from other democracies looking to us as an example. And Trump is burning through that authority like it's an unlimited resource. He is discovering that you can just bully allies, threaten invasions, shoot your own citizens, and expect the world to keep treating America with respect. One Danish commenter wrote about losing a family member fighting alongside American troops in Afghanistan. And now watching Trump threaten to take their territory. The betrayal they feel, the contempt, and multiplied across NATO allies who've stood with us for 75 years, that is a strategic disaster that will take generations to repair. But back to Minnesota, because this is where we are right now. Judge Schiltz forced ICE to back down in one case, one person released. That's good. But what about the dozens of other court orders ICE has ignored? What about all the people detained without bond hearings? What about the people deported to Texas and told to figure out their own way home? What about justice for Alex Priddy and Renee Good? Here's what needs to happen, and I am being specific because vague calls for action don't change anything. First, every federal judge who has had their orders ignored by ICE needs to issue contempt citations immediately. Not warnings, not patience. Contempt. Arrest warrants for officials who violate court orders. You can have a functioning legal system if one branch of government can just ignore the judiciary with no consequences. Second, Democrats in Congress need to move forward with impeaching Kristi Noem regardless of whether they have the votes yet. Put Republicans on record defending an administration that is shooting citizens and defying courts. Make them own it. Let their constituents see exactly where they stand. Third, states need to start treating ICE agents who violate the law like what they are, criminals. If they break into a home without a proper warrant, that's breaking and entering. Arrest them. If they assault protesters, that's assault. Arrest them. If they shoot unarmed citizens, that's murder. Arrest them. Stop treating federal agents like they above state law. Fourth, we need massive peaceful protests, but organized and strategic, not just marching and going home. Sustained pressure. Economic boycotts, work stoppages, civil disobedience make the cost of this policy too high to sustain. And fifth, everyone needs to be recording everything, every ICE interaction, every protest, every confrontation. Because the only reason we know what happened to Alex Priddy and Renee Good is because people were filming. Without that video evidence, ICE would have spun whatever story they wanted and the truth would never have come out. Now let me be clear about something. I'm not calling for violence. I am explicitly calling for peaceful resistance within the law. But peaceful doesn't mean passive. It doesn't mean rolling over. It means using every legal tool available, every constitutional right, every democratic mechanism to resist authoritarianism. And I know some of you are thinking this sounds extreme, that I am being hyperbolic calling this authoritarianism. So let me ask you this. If federal agents ignoring court orders, breaking into homes without proper warrants, shooting citizens exercising constitutional rights, and demanding voter data as political extortion isn't authoritarianism, what is? What would it take for you to use that word? How much further does this have to go? Because I'll tell you what I think. I think we're at a decision point as a country. We either accept that federal agents can operate outside the law and constitutional protections don't mean anything, or we don't. We either have a system where judges can enforce their orders and rights are real, or we don't. There's no middle ground here. And the reason the Trump administration folded so fast when Judge Schiltz gave them an ultimatum is because they know this too. They know that if Todd Lyons has to testify under oath about that memo, about ICE policies, about ignoring court orders, the whole operation gets exposed. They know the public would be outraged. They know even some Trump supporters would turn against them. So they chose to release one person rather than risk that exposure. But here is what that tells me. It tells me they re-vulnerable. It tells me that when judges actually use their power, when officials actually face consequences, the Trump administration backs down. They re-bullies. And bullies fold when someone stands up to them. So my message to every federal judge dealing with ICE right now is this: stop being patient. Stop giving them chances. They've shown you they want to comply voluntarily. Use your contempt power. Issue arrest warrants. Throw officials in jail until they follow your orders. Because if you if you keep warning without acting, you are teaching them that court orders are suggestions they can ignore. And my message to everyone watching this is, don't let this become normal. Don't get numb to it. Don't accept it just because it's been going on for a few weeks and you are tired of being outraged. Because that's how authoritarianism wins, not through a sudden coup, through gradual normalization, through exhaustion, through people deciding it's too hard to keep fighting. Every time you see a video of federal agents breaking the law, share it. Every time ICE ignores a court order, call your representative. Every time Trump threatens an ally or shoots a citizen or demands voter data, make noise about it. Don't let it fade into the background. I am going to keep covering this. I am going to keep tracking every court case, every ICE violation, every abuse of power, and I am asking you to do the same. Pay attention, stay informed, stay engaged, because the only way we lose this fight is if we stop fighting. And to the 5 Republicans in the House who are on the fence about impeaching Kristi Noem, I want to say this directly. Your constituents are watching. The whole country is watching. History is watching. You have a choice to make about what you stand for. Do you stand for the rule of law or for protecting Trump's appointees? Do you stand for constitutional rights or for federal agents operating like a paramilitary force? Do you stand for America or for authoritarianism? Because I promise you this: if you vote to protect Noem after everything that happened in Minnesota, that vote will follow you for the rest of your political career. Your opponents will run ads showing Alex Pretty and Renee Good being killed, and they'll say you chose to protect the administration that did that. And I don't think that as a vote you can survive politically. This is bigger than party. This is bigger than Trump. This is about whether we were going to be a country where rights mean something, where courts have authority, where federal agents can operate outside the law. And we need people in both parties to stand up and say no. This far and no further. I might be wrong about some of this. Maybe the Trump administration isn't as vulnerable as I think. Maybe Americans care enough to vote based on this in the midterms. Maybe the system is too broken to push back effectively. But I don't think so. I think Judge Schiltz showed us the template. Give them a real choice with real consequences, and they fold. So that's what we have to do. Make the cost of defying courts higher than the cost of complying. Make the political price of shooting citizens higher than Trump's anger at backing down. Make the consequences real and immediate and unavoidable. And to everyone who warned about this, who saw this coming, who was called hysterical for saying Trump was a threat to democracy, you were right. You were absolutely right. And now the question is what we do about it. I am going to end with this. Someone commented, "This regime is murdering us and Congress is accessory." And while I dequalify that by saying some members of Congress are fighting back hard, the core truth there is undeniable. People are dead. American citizens killed by federal agents. And unless there are consequences, unless people are held accountable, unless the system actually works, then we've already lost what makes America different from authoritarian states. So here's my call to action. Contact your representatives today, not tomorrow. Today. Tell them to impeach Kristi Noem. Tell them to hold ICE accountable. Tell them to protect constitutional rights. And if they want tell them you'll remember that when you vote. Join the protests if you can. If you in Minnesota or near any major city, show up on January 30th at 2 p.m. That's when the next major action is planned. Be peaceful, be strategic, be visible. Document everything. Film every ICE interaction you see. Share it. Make it impossible to hide what's happening. And most importantly, don't give up. Don't get exhausted. Don't let them normalize this, because that's what they recounting on. They are counting on you getting tired, getting overwhelmed, moving on to the next outrage while they consolidate power. I want to let that happen. I am in this fight for the long haul, and I am asking you to be too. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring, and thank you for refusing to accept authoritarianism in America.